welcome to Crossfire, the show that dives into the heart of global conflicts, where nations collide, alliances shift, and lives hang in the balance. On tonight's show, we tell you how Japan's underworld has been selling nuclear material to Iran that could have sparked a wider conflict in the already volatile West Asia. Also on the show, we tell you why Taiwan may bring in a foreign legion of fighters as it grapples with China's growing military might. Stay tuned as we break down these critical developments and explore their impact on the future of global power and security. A notorious Japanese crime boss has now pleaded guilty to a conspiracy that could have sparked global chaos. Takeshi Ebisawa, a Yakuza leader, admitted to attempting to sell nuclear materials to Iran, materials that could fuel a nuclear weapons program. But this case goes beyond nuclear smuggling, involving illegal arms deals, drug trafficking, and the potential for war. But one question remains. How did a Yakuza boss end up in a conspiracy with weapons-grade plutonium? Our next report decodes it for you.
A notorious Japanese crime boss has pleaded guilty to a conspiracy that could have triggered a global security catastrophe. Takeshi Ebisawa, a high-ranking member of Japan's feared Yakuza, has admitted to orchestrating a scheme to sell nuclear material to Iran. Material that could have fueled a nuclear weapons program. But this case is far more than just a nuclear smuggling operation. It's a complex web of international crime that spans drug trafficking, weapons deals, and the risk of destabilizing entire regions. Ebisawa appeared in a Manhattan federal court where he pleaded guilty to 6 federal charges. These included not only his plot to sell uranium and thorium from Myanmar to Iran, but also his involvement in illegal arms deals and a sprawling drug trafficking operation. The charges carry the weight of international implications as authorities warned that his actions posed a direct threat to national and global security. So how did a Yakuza boss end up in a conspiracy involving nuclear materials, weapons, and drugs? The plot began in 2020, when Ebisawa made contact with an undercover agent associated with America's Drug Enforcement Administration. What followed was a terrifying proposal. Ebisawa claimed that he had acquired large quantities of uranium and thorium and was eager to broker a deal with an Iranian buyer. But his ambitions didn't stop there. According to prosecutors, Ebisawa went further, offering to supply plutonium, a far more powerful weapon that could be used in nuclear weapons. Ebisawa and his associates presented the undercover agents with a yellow powder that, after lab analysis, was confirmed to contain uranium, thorium, and plutonium, precursors for weapons of mass destruction. The story, though, doesn't end with nuclear material. Ebisawa's conspiracy also involved the purchase of US-made surface-to-air missiles and heavy-duty weaponry intended for ethnic armed groups in Myanmar. This case raises a critical question. What happens when organized crime syndicates gain access to weapons-grade plutonium and nuclear materials? And how can countries work together to prevent these shadowy figures from destabilizing our world? The answers are still unfolding, but one thing is certain. This is a wake-up call that global security must be more than just a mere priority.
Tensions in the Taiwan Strait are at a boiling point. Taiwan may now be turning to an unprecedented solution to counter China's military dominance, a foreign legion of fighters. Inspired by Ukraine's defense strategy, Taiwan is now exploring the idea of recruiting international troops to offset its shrinking military ranks. With a dwindling birth rate and a massive numerical disadvantage against China, could this controversial plan bolster its defenses or spark even greater conflict in the region? Our next report decodes it for you.
Tensions in the Taiwan Strait are surging. This comes as Taiwan is considering a bold new strategy to counter China's military might. The kind of international force seen in conflict zones like Ukraine is being discussed as a solution to bolster Taiwan's shrinking military ranks. Could this controversial proposal be a game changer in Taiwanese defense against growing Chinese aggression? Taiwan's military is grappling with a serious challenge: a troop shortage amid rising threats from China. In a radical move, lawmakers and security experts are exploring the creation of a foreign legion. an idea inspired by similar forces in countries like Ukraine. Experts say that Taiwan's dwindling birth rate, one of the lowest in the world, is set to shrink the pool of available conscripts in the years ahead. The island's active military strength currently stands at 169,000 troops with 1.66 million reservists. In stark contrast, China's People's Liberation Army boasts over 2 million active soldiers and 500,000 reservists, posing an overwhelming numerical advantage. Taiwan has been drawing lessons from Ukraine's defense against Russia, ramping up its civil defense initiatives, boosting military spending, and extending mandatory military service from 4 months to 1 year. But questions remain about whether these steps will be enough. Meanwhile, China continues its aggressive tactics. This week, the Taiwanese Coast Guard detained a Chinese vessel suspected of damaging an internet cable off the island's northeast coast. This is the latest in a series of grey zone actions by Beijing. 2 years ago, Taiwan's outlying islands were almost cut off from the internet after similar incidents involving Chinese vessels. China views Taiwan as a breakaway province and has repeatedly threatened to use force to bring the island under its control. With military incursions by Chinese warships and jets becoming a near-daily reality, Taiwan's need to bolster its defenses has never been more urgent. So, could international fighters help level the playing field against China's overwhelming military power, or would it risk escalating tensions further?
Israel is under fire for obstructing a United Nations investigations into allegations of sexual violence during the Hamas-led October 7 attacks. Now, this move has sparked widespread criticism as the UN inquiry also sought access to Israeli detention centers to investigate claims of abuse against Palestinians. Now, critics argue that Israel's refusal may stem from fears of being added to a UN blacklist of nations accused of sexual violence and conflicts. So, can justice prevail when one side evades scrutiny, or is this yet another casualty of war's brutal realities? Our next report tells you more.
Israel is now facing mounting criticism for blocking a United Nations investigation into sexual violence allegations during the Hamas-led 7th October attacks. This move has generated a storm of controversy as questions arise about the accountability of all sides in this intensifying conflict. Reports from Israeli media outlet Haaretz reveal that the Israeli government has refused to cooperate with the UN investigation team. The United Nations proposed an inquiry into sexual violence during the October 7th attacks, with the condition that UN investigators also gain access to Israeli detention centers. This would be done to examine allegations of abuse against Palestinians. The request, though, was swiftly rejected by Israeli officials. Critics argue that Israel's refusal stems from fears that the investigation could lead to its inclusion on a UN blacklist of nations accused of sexual violence in conflict, a list that ironically might not include Hamas. The allegations against Israel's detention centers are not new. Israel has long been accused of systemic mistreatment, including torture, sexual abuse, and even murder. Reports of such abuses have resurfaced during the ongoing Gaza war, with detainees describing worsening conditions. Meanwhile, back in July, 9 Israeli soldiers were arrested for allegedly raping a Palestinian detainee at an Israeli facility. Palestinian officials and human rights advocates argue that accountability for abuses against Palestinians must be addressed alongside accusations against Hamas. Yet Israel's continued rejection of UN inquiries raises the question, can justice be served when one side refuses scrutiny? Or is this yet another casualty of a conflict where truth remains the first victim?
Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of Crossfire. Stay tuned to India Today Global, where we simplify geopolitics for you.